A police officer thought his past was buried in the snow, until one stormy night his old K9, Rex, ran into the blizzard and found a little girl whispering, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'll be good." She had no home, no family, only a photo of a woman the officer once saved long ago. That night, a man broken by loss, a child lost in the storm, and a loyal dog found each other. And nothing would ever be the same again. What happened next will melt your heart and make you believe in second chances. Before we start, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. The wind howled down from the northern ridge, dragging with it needles of snow that stung any bare skin they found. Coldwater Ridge, Colorado, lay buried under a storm that seemed to swallow sound itself. A small mountain town where pine forests hunched beneath white weight and power lines moaned in the wind. Streetlights flickered dimly, throwing long streaks of amber across the drifts before vanishing into darkness. Inside a lone cabin on the outskirts, Jack Rowan, age 38, sat by the dying fire. He was a man whose posture carried the weight of someone who had seen too much and slept too little. His frame was broad, but there was a slight hunch to his shoulders, as if every gust outside pressed deeper into him. His dark hair had grown uneven, the edges flecked with gray, and the faint shadow of a beard framed a face marked by sleepless nights. His right cheek bore a thin scar, the kind left by flying glass, and his blue-gray eyes were distant, fixed on flames that offered no warmth. Once he'd been a police officer in Denver, the kind who never looked away when others did. Until the night a homemade explosive ripped through a parked car and took his wife, Laura, with it. After that, the city had become a cage of memories, and Jack retreated to the mountains under the pretense of recovery leave. But Coldwater Ridge hadn't healed him. It had only given him quieter ghosts. At his feet, Rex stirred. The 9-year-old German shepherd stretched his aging legs, one of them slightly stiff from an old tendon injury. His coat, a deep mix of charcoal and tan, gleamed faintly in the firelight. The years had dulled his speed, but not his spirit. His amber eyes, intelligent, steady, watched his handler with an awareness that sometimes felt almost human. In the field, Rex had been legendary, trained for K9 rescue, narcotics, and patrol, brave to the point of recklessness. Now retired, he was Jack's shadow, his heartbeat, and perhaps the only reason Jack still kept breathing through the long, sleepless nights. The wind screamed outside, rattling the windows. Jack leaned back in his chair, fingers tracing the edge of an old photograph on the table. Him, Laura, and Rex in full uniform. Snow clung to their shoulders, the kind of shot officers take after a long winter shift. Tired but proud. The frame slipped from his hand and crashed onto the floor. The glass shattered. For a moment, Jack just stared at it. Then Rex moved, padding forward, nose pressed against the fallen photo, tongue gently sweeping over the image as if to wipe away the shards. Jack exhaled. "Yeah," he muttered. "You still remember her too, don't you, boy?" The room was dim. Only the red flicker of fire danced across the log walls. The clock on the mantel ticked past midnight. Outside, the storm deepened, a living thing that clawed and roared against the world. Then Rex's head snapped up. His ears pricked sharply, the low rumble. In his throat was neither fear nor warning. It was instinct awakening like a muscle long asleep. He moved to the door, nose twitching. Jack frowned. "What is it?" Rex didn't answer, of course. He barked once, short, urgent, then another, pacing to the window. Jack crossed the room, pulled the curtain aside. Nothing but white. The blizzard had swallowed everything. The porch, the trees, even the outline of the old fence post. "Nothing out there," he said quietly. But Rex growled again, pawing the door now, nails scratching wood. Then, faintly, through the wailing storm, Jack thought he heard it too. A sound, so soft it could have been the wind playing tricks. A child's voice. "Mom, I'll be good." Jack froze. For a second, he just stood there, heart hammering against his ribs. The rational part of him said it was nothing. The wind, memory, exhaustion. But Rex was already pushing harder, muscles tense, tail low. "Stay," Jack ordered, voice firm. Rex ignored him. With a sharp bark, he leapt at the handle, pressing it down with his paw, a trick he'd learned years ago. The door burst open. The cold hit like a slap. Snow whipped inside, swirling across the wooden floor. "Rex!" But the dog was already gone, a dark blur vanishing into white. Jack cursed under his breath, snatched his flashlight, threw on his heavy coat and gloves, and stepped out into the storm. The wind bit at his face instantly, stealing his breath. He clicked on the beam, a narrow cone of light that barely reached 10 feet ahead. The snow wasn't falling anymore. It was flying sideways, slicing across the night like shards of glass. He followed the paw prints. They led off the porch, down the slope toward the tree line. "Rex, get back here!" His voice vanished in the wind. Each step was a fight. Snow came up to his knees, then higher. His flashlight flickered, shadows shifting. Somewhere far off he thought he saw movement. A brief dart of brown against the white. He trudged forward, heart pounding. Across the valley, another radio crackled to life in the rescue outpost. Sarah Mitchell was hunched over a map spread across a metal table. She was in her mid-30s, tall and wiry, with long auburn hair twisted into a low braid that kept brushing her cheek whenever she leaned forward. Her features were sharp but kind, the sort of woman whose expression carried both discipline and softness. Years of working with injured animals had left small scars along her forearms, but she wore them like medals. Sarah had once been a field vet for the National Guard, stationed in Texas during the wildfire crises. She'd seen enough suffering to last a lifetime, and when her husband died in a car accident 3 winters ago, she'd moved back to her hometown of Coldwater to start over. The mountains had given her solitude. Helping animals gave her purpose. Now she stood in the flickering light of the rescue station, listening to static-filled reports. "Search Team 3, negative contact near Hollow Creek." She pinched the bridge of her nose, exhaustion heavy in her bones. "Still nothing on the missing kid?" she asked the deputy beside her. Deputy Luke Grant, early 40s, solid build, brown beard rimmed with ice, shook his head. "Not since the storm rolled in. Dispatch says she wandered off from the motel. No tracks after the wind picked up." Sarah's jaw tightened. She glanced at the radar. Another front was closing in. "She won't last till morning out there." Luke hesitated. "You think we should pull back?" She shot him a look. "You pull back, she dies. Keep the search grid going." She turned to her radio and keyed it. "This is Dr. Mitchell. Thermal readings show a faint heat signature North Ridge, near the old cabins." Static. Then a faint male voice. "Copy that. Closest units." Sarah frowned as another signal cut through. It was Jack's call sign, barely audible. "Unit 12, following K9. Possible lead in Sector 7. Her eyes widened. Jack Rowan, the man who'd vanished into isolation after the Denver tragedy. She hadn't spoken to him in months, but she knew he lived near that ridge. She grabbed the radio. "Jack, this is Sarah. Be advised, we've got a child missing in your area. Don't go alone. Conditions are lethal." Nothing. Only wind. Then, faintly, "Already on it." The storm had not softened. It screamed through the pine trees, bending their dark arms under the white weight. Jack Rowan leaned forward, his body a silhouette against the spinning snow. His breath came in bursts, fogging up the beam of the flashlight that trembled in his gloved hand. Rex moved ahead, a streak of motion and purpose in the pale chaos, his collar light glowing like a distant star guiding them both through the blizzard. The forest was unrecognizable. Every trail had been swallowed, every familiar landmark turned into ghostly shapes. Jack followed only the dog's tracks, fleeting prints already being erased by wind. "Rex," he shouted, voice muffled. "Easy, boy. Slow down." But Rex didn't slow. His instincts were locked on something. A scent of fear, of life slipping away in the snow. Jack's muscles burned. His shoulder, still damaged from an old case in Denver, protested every movement. He had been in gunfights, explosions, the chaos of city nights, but nothing had ever felt this cold, this alive. He stumbled forward until Rex stopped near a clearing. The dog's tail stiffened. He barked once, sharp and urgent. Jack's flashlight swept over a half-buried playground, a relic from when the nearby cabins had hosted summer families. The slide jutted out of the snow like a bone, its rusted curve half collapsed under the storm's weight. At its base was a shape, small, motionless. Jack dropped to his knees. Oh, God! He brushed away snow with his bare hands, ignoring the sting. It was a girl. Couldn't have been older than 10. Her hair was light brown, tangled with frost. Her coat was thin, the fabric torn at the sleeve. She was curled tight like a wounded animal. "Hey, can you hear me?" Jack pressed his fingers to her neck. Faint pulse, shallow breath. Her lips trembled and moved. "Mom, I'm sorry." Then her voice vanished. Rex whined, circling once before pressing his nose to her cheek. The dog's breath steamed in the air. Jack's hands were already moving, unzipping his heavy coat, wrapping her inside it. She was so light, as if made of snow herself. "You're okay. I've got you now," he muttered, more to himself than her. He adjusted her weight, turned toward the forest. "Rex, home. Take us home." The shepherd barked once and ran ahead, a dark outline cutting through the storm. Jack followed, boots sinking deep, every step a battle. He could barely see, could barely feel his fingers. The girl's head rested against his chest, her small body limp. He bent low against the wind and whispered, "Don't sleep, sweetheart. Rex will lead us." Halfway down the ridge, his radio crackled. Through the static came a familiar voice. "Jack, this is Sarah Mitchell. Do you copy?" He stopped, breath sharp. "Go ahead." The connection hissed, distorted, then steadied. "We've found an abandoned truck near the highway turnoff. Inside was a medical file. Name's Melissa Evans, listed under domestic abuse case. The child on record is 10 years old." Her tone shifted, careful. "That girl with you, Jack? She could be Melissa's daughter." Jack tightened his hold on the child. "Copy that. She's alive but barely. I'm bringing her in." "Be careful," Sarah said softly. "The temperature's dropping fast. Don't stop moving." He didn't. The minutes stretched into eternity. The snow clawed at his legs. He thought of Laura, his wife, the way she used to hum old songs when storms hit Denver, trying to make the sirens sound less cruel. "You'd tell me not to do this alone," he whispered into the storm. "Guess you're right, as usual." Ahead, Rex's light blinked. Once, twice, the signal he'd trained for emergencies. The dog was close to home. The sight reignited something in Jack, a surge of determination that burned hotter than fear. He forced himself forward until the outline of the cabin appeared, buried in snow but standing strong, its porch light glowing faintly through the white blur. Inside, he kicked the door shut and stumbled toward the fireplace. The girl's skin was like ice. "Rex! Blankets! Go!" The dog bounded to the corner, tugging at the wool throws with his teeth until they fell into Jack's hands. He wrapped her tightly, rubbing her arms, trying to coax warmth back into her small frame. The fire roared higher as he threw on more wood. He touched her face again. Faint color now, just a hint. Her breathing steadied, shallow but rhythmic. "That's it," he whispered. "Stay with me." The cabin was filled with the scent of smoke and melting snow. Rex lay down beside the couch, his chest rising fast from exertion. Jack looked at him and smiled weakly. "You did good, partner." The dog's tail thumped once against the floor before he closed his eyes, listening to the wind die a little. Across the valley, Sarah and Deputy Luke followed the GPS trail toward the truck they'd found. Luke was a heavy-set man in his early 40s, with a beard crusted in frost, and the patient steadiness of someone who'd seen too many winters in these mountains. His uniform jacket strained against his shoulders, the sheriff's badge dulled from years of use. "If the kid's hers," he said, glancing toward Sarah, "then the mother might still be close." Sarah tightened her grip on the flashlight. "Or she's not." Melissa Evans filed 3 restraining orders in Denver before vanishing. If she ran with her daughter, it's because she was terrified. Luke sighed. "And if the guy followed her here—" "Then we're running out of time," Sarah finished, her tone cold. She'd learned long ago that sympathy was useless without action. Every case she'd seen, every animal rescued too late, had carved that lesson deep. She brushed snow off her brow and crouched near the truck. The door hung open, half buried in a drift. Inside, under an old blanket, she found a worn medical folder and a broken photo frame. The picture was of a woman, mid-30s, tired eyes, holding a little girl in her lap, both smiling despite the bruises faintly visible on the woman's cheek. Sarah's throat tightened. "Melissa, what did you get yourself into?" She glanced at the rear of the truck. There were tiny footprints leading into the woods, then gone, erased by wind. She clicked the radio again. "Dispatch, this is Mitchell. Confirm visual on truck belonging to Melissa Evans. No sign of driver. Likely connection to missing child. Officer Rowan is en route back with possible survivor." "Copy that," came the reply. Luke straightened, scanning the ridge. "We should head to Rowan's cabin. It's the closest shelter." "Right," Sarah said. "And Luke, bring medical supplies. We might need them." By the time they arrived, the storm had softened into a cold whisper. The snowflakes were larger now, falling slower, like feathers from the clouds. The porch light of Jack's cabin glowed through the mist. Sarah stepped out of the truck, boots sinking into fresh powder. Her face was flushed from the cold, her eyes sharp. She knocked twice before Jack opened the door. Inside, warmth hit her immediately. Fire crackling, wet clothes steaming on the rack. On the couch lay the girl, swaddled in blankets, skin pale but alive. Jack stood beside her, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Rex lifted his head from the floor and wagged his tail once in recognition. "Good God," Sarah breathed, moving closer. "She's freezing." She knelt, checking the girl's pulse, then looked up at Jack. "How long was she out there?" "Too long," he said. "She said Mom before she passed out. That's all I got." Sarah nodded. "We'll get her warm, then we'll talk." Luke entered behind her, brushing snow off his uniform. "This kid the one from the report?" "Looks like it," Sarah said quietly. She turned back to Jack. "That name I told you over the radio. Melissa Evans. Does it mean anything to you?" Jack hesitated. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe guilt. "I remember the case," he said finally. "Domestic violence, Denver. I was the responding officer the first time she called for help." Sarah's expression softened. "Then you saved her once before." Jack looked down at the girl, her chest rising under the blankets. "Maybe not soon enough." Outside, the storm finally broke apart, revealing the faint outline of the moon above Coldwater Ridge. Inside, silence fell. The kind that comes after fear, fragile and full of promise. Rex stretched, resting his muzzle near the child's hand, and for the first time that night the world seemed to hold its breath. The morning came pale and hesitant, the kind that barely broke through the clouds after a long storm. The snow had stopped, but the world outside Jack's cabin was still buried in white silence. Inside, the air smelled of pine wood and smoke. The fire had burned low, just enough to keep the chill at bay. Jack Rowan sat on the edge of the couch, elbows resting on his knees, watching the child he'd carried through the storm. Her name. He still didn't know it. The girl stirred under the blankets, lashes fluttering. Her skin had regained a hint of color, and when her eyes finally opened, they were a soft hazel, distant yet sharp, the eyes of someone who had learned too early how to protect herself. She flinched when she saw him, her small body tensing under the covers. Jack raised a hand slowly. "You're safe," he said quietly. "You're in my cabin. The storm's over." The girl's gaze darted from him to Rex, who lay stretched on the rug, his head resting on his paws, one ear twitching lazily. The German shepherd's presence seemed to ease her fear. She reached a trembling hand toward him. "Hey, partner," Jack murmured to Rex. "Looks like you've made a friend." The dog's tail brushed the floor once in silent acknowledgement. The girl's fingers brushed his fur, and something in her expression softened. "Do you remember your name?" Jack asked. A pause. Then, softly, "Emily." It was the first word she'd spoken since the storm. Jack nodded, his chest tightening at the sound. "All right, Emily, you're safe here. We'll figure this out." He stood and moved toward the small stove to warm some soup. When he turned back, Rex was sitting upright, ears forward, eyes fixed on Emily's coat draped over a chair. She noticed it too. Her small hand reached out for the pocket. Jack hesitated, but passed it to her. From the torn lining, she pulled a folded piece of paper. A photograph, worn and water-damaged, its edges curled from age. Jack froze as he saw it. A woman, smiling faintly despite the bruise along her jaw, her arm wrapped protectively around a little girl no older than 4. The same eyes, the same light brown hair, Emily. But it wasn't the girl that stopped his breath. It was the woman. He knew that face. Melissa Evans. 6 years ago, she had been standing on a front porch in Denver, clutching her child, blood dripping from a split lip, whispering, "Please, just don't let him find us again." Jack had been the officer on that call. He'd promised to keep her safe. Days later, she vanished from the shelter. Now, here was her daughter, lying in his cabin, clutching the same photo like a lifeline. Jack's hand tightened around the frame of the stove. "Melissa," he whispered under his breath. Emily looked up, wary. "You knew her?" she asked. Jack nodded. "A long time ago." She said nothing more, only pressed the photo to her chest, curling slightly as if it could protect her from the world. Rex moved closer, resting his head against her leg. She didn't push him away. Jack's radio crackled on the shelf. He reached for it. "Dispatch. This is Rowan. The child we found, her name's Emily Evans. Her mother might be Melissa Evans, missing person from Denver 6 years back. The father was wanted for domestic assault." The voice of Deputy Luke came through, steady and low. "Copy that, Jack. We've reopened the file. There's chatter from the state police that the father, Richard Evans, was sighted 2 weeks ago near Clearbrook Logging Camp, 20 miles out. Old warehouse by the river." Jack's jaw tightened. "That close?" "Yeah," Luke replied. "I'll head out to confirm. You stay put, keep the kids safe. And Jack, be careful who you tell. If he's still running, he's desperate." The radio clicked off. Jack set it down slowly. He looked at Emily again. "Your mom," he began, but she shook her head. "She's gone," she said simply. "He hurt her. Then she told me to run." Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. That broke him more than tears ever could. Rex whined softly and nudged her arm. She managed a small smile, the first he'd seen. "He heard me," she whispered, "when no one else did." Jack frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "When I said I was sorry, out there." She looked toward the window, where snow drifted gently against the glass. "He came." Jack's throat tightened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "He's good at that." Later that morning, Sarah arrived with her vet bag slung over her shoulder. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, strands of auburn hair escaping her braid. Her tall frame filled the doorway, boots dusted with snow. "Morning," she said softly, scanning the room. "Heard your dog took a beating last night." Rex lifted his head at the sound of her voice, tail wagging faintly. "He's fine," Jack said, though his tone betrayed exhaustion. "Just overdid it." Sarah knelt, her gloved hands moving with gentle precision as she examined Rex's swollen leg. Her touch was firm but kind, years of experience shaping her calm. "Sprain," she murmured. "He'll limp for a few days, but he's tougher than he looks." She glanced up, smiling briefly. "You both are." Jack exhaled a quiet laugh, the first sound resembling relief in days. "You always show up when things get complicated." "That's my specialty," she replied. Her eyes flicked toward the couch where Emily sat clutching a mug of warm milk. "She's the one from the Alert, isn't she?" Jack nodded. Sarah's expression softened. "Poor kid. But she's lucky you found her." She rose to her feet, brushing snow from her coat. "I'll drop off some supplies later. Heat packs, antibiotics, maybe some food for the dog. And Jack," she paused, "try to sleep. You look like hell." When she left, the cabin felt quieter, heavier. Again. Jack sat near the window, watching the trees sway under their load of snow. Emily was at the table now, a piece of charcoal in her hand and an old sheet of paper before her. She drew silently for a long while, lines emerging like whispers on the page. When she was done, she slid it toward the fire. Jack leaned closer. It was Rex, standing in the storm, light glowing from his collar. Beneath, in uneven handwriting, "He heard me." Jack didn't know what to say. He just reached out and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "He did," he said quietly, "and we will again." As night fell, the radio came alive once more. Luke's voice cut through static. "Jack, it's confirmed. The suspect's been staying near the old sawmill by the river. Looks like he's not alone. We found tire tracks, supplies, maybe another vehicle. I'll coordinate with State Patrol in the morning." Jack looked toward the sleeping child on the couch, her hand resting in Rex's fur. The weight of guilt pressed heavy on him. 6 years ago he had promised a frightened woman safety and failed to keep it. Now her daughter was under his roof. Maybe fate was giving him a second chance, or demanding repayment. He reached down, rubbing Rex's head. "We started this together, partner," he murmured. "Let's finish it right this time." Outside, the snow began again, softer now, falling like ash in the wind. Inside, the cabin glowed with quiet life, the hum of the fire, the faint breaths of a child asleep, and the steady heartbeat of a man who, for the first time in years, felt a purpose return. The wind had calmed by nightfall, but the world outside the cabin remained eerily still, the kind of silence that hums beneath your skin. Snow glowed faintly under the moon, and the pines stood black and unmoving, their branches heavy with ice. Inside, the cabin breathed with quiet life. The low hiss of the fire, the gentle rustle of blankets as Emily slept, and the rhythmic thump of Rex's tail whenever she stirred. Jack sat by the window, a half-empty mug of coffee cooling in his hands. His gaze flicked toward the edge of the forest every few minutes. Old instincts didn't die easily. He'd seen too many nights like this, the calm before something broke. Rex lifted his head suddenly, ears sharp, nose twitching toward the dark. Jack set his mug down. "What is it, boy?" The German shepherd stood, stiff-legged, hackles rising. A low growl vibrated in his chest, deep and warning. Jack moved toward the door, grabbing the flashlight and his service pistol from the shelf. He cracked the door open. Cold air sliced through the room like a knife. Nothing but white. Nothing but wind. Then, faint, the crunch of snow. Slow, measured. Jack's pulse quickened. He stepped onto the porch, snow crunching beneath his boots. The beam of his flashlight cut across the yard and landed on a shadow. A man, thick-shouldered, wearing a torn parka and heavy boots, trudged up the slope. His face was half hidden under the hood, but Jack saw the glint of something metallic in his hand. "Stop, right there," Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the quiet. The man froze for a second, then stepped forward into the light. The hood fell back, revealing a weathered face, jaw covered in scruff, eyes wild and red-rimmed. Richard Evans. The mugshot hadn't done him justice. Up close, he looked meaner. Years of anger etched deep into his skin, veins visible along his neck like cords about to snap. "She's mine," Richard rasped. "You've got something that belongs to me." Jack's stance stiffened, gun raised but steady. "She's a child, not property. You need to back away now." The man laughed, short, bitter. "You don't know anything. You cops took everything. My job, my family, my name. She's all I got left." His voice cracked on the last word, something feral flashing in his eyes. Rex growled louder, stepping forward to stand between them. The sound made Richard's lips curl. "That damn dog again," he hissed, "always in the way." He lifted the gun. "Don't do it," Jack warned, finger on the trigger. "Put it down." But rage doesn't listen. The flash came first, the crack of a gunshot splitting the cold. Jack barely saw the movement before Rex lunged. The German Shepherd hit him full force, a blur of black and tan. The shot went wide, tearing into the snowbank, but a second report echoed immediately after. Rex yelped. Jack fired. Richard dropped to his knees, the pistol flying from his grip, eyes wide with shock. By the time the echo faded, he was face down in the snow, hands behind his head as Jack cuffed him, voice hoarse and shaking. "You're done." But Rex... Jack turned. The world seemed to narrow, sound muffled by the roar of blood in his ears. Rex lay in the snow, one paw twisted, chest rising unevenly. The fur along his shoulder was dark with blood. Jack dropped to his knees beside him. Hey, stay with me, buddy." His voice broke, rough with desperation. "You hear me? You're not done. You're not done." Rex's amber eyes met his, steady, trusting. His tail thumped weakly once against the snow. Inside, Emily stirred at the noise, confusion turning to panic as she saw the open door. She ran outside barefoot, her small form swallowed by the cold light. "Rex!" she screamed. She fell to her knees beside the dog, pressing her tiny hands against his fur, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Don't go," she whispered. "Please don't go." Jack's hand found her shoulder. "He's holding on. We just have to keep him warm. Sarah's on her way." As if summoned, headlights cut through the trees. The soft wail of a siren grew closer. First responders from town, led by Sarah's old pickup. She jumped out before the engine stopped, tall frame moving fast through the snow. Her auburn hair was loose now, whipping in the wind, her green parka half-buttoned. "Where is he?" she shouted. "Here," Jack called back. Sarah dropped to her knees beside Rex, pulling gloves on with shaking hands. Her voice, calm even in chaos, took command. "Get blankets. We need pressure on the wound." Jack obeyed, adrenaline making every movement sharp and mechanical. Emily stayed pressed to Rex's side, whispering to him softly. Sarah worked quickly, wrapping gauze, applying pressure, checking for breathing. Her face was pale under the porch light, but her hands didn't falter. "He's strong," she said quietly. "If we keep him stable, he's got a chance." Jack swallowed hard. "That's all I need." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time saw not the stoic officer, but a man breaking in silence. "You did good," she said softly. "He took that shot for you. He knows." Behind them, two deputies dragged Richard toward the patrol car. His face was twisted in fury and shame. He tried to look back at the cabin but couldn't meet Emily's eyes. Luke, the deputy with calm gray eyes and the kind of build that made people listen, shoved him inside the cruiser. "You'll get your say in court," he muttered. As the red and blue lights spun over the snow, Jack knelt again beside Rex. "You stay with me, partner," he whispered. "You're not done yet." Rex's breath came shallow but steady. His eyes flickered toward Emily, and she leaned down, pressing her forehead gently against his. "You heard me," she murmured again. You always do." Sarah's hands were steady as she finished wrapping the wound. "We can't move him yet," she said. "It could open again. Let him rest. Keep him warm." Jack nodded, pulling his jacket over Rex's body, the heat from the fire inside glowing faintly through the cabin windows. The storm had stopped, but flakes of new snow began to fall, light and slow. Emily's tears mingled with them as she held Rex's paw, her breath fogging in the cold. The distant hum of the ambulance grew louder. Its headlights washed over the yard, turning the snow to silver. As paramedics stepped out, one of them paused, eyes softening at the sight of the dog surrounded by blankets, a child clinging to his side. "He's a hero," she whispered. Sarah nodded, exhaustion etched deep in her face. "Yeah, the best kind." Jack rose to his feet, shoulders trembling with fatigue. "We'll take him to the clinic," Sarah said, standing too. "It's going to be a long night." Jack glanced once at the handcuffed man inside the cruiser, then at Rex. His voice was low but firm. "We finish this tomorrow. Tonight, he's all that matters." As the ambulance doors closed and the lights reflected in Rex's half-lidded eyes, something glimmered there. Not fear, not pain, but the same quiet strength that had carried them through every storm before. The snow fell thicker now, muting the sound of sirens as they faded down the road. Inside the cabin's doorway, the firelight danced faintly across the empty couch and the small drawing still resting on the mantel. Rex in the snow, light glowing from his collar, and under it, the words written by a child's hand. "He heard me." Outside, the last thing Jack saw before the darkness swallowed the road was Rex's reflection in the rear window of the ambulance. Eyes bright, unbroken, still watching. By the time spring reached Coldwater Ridge, the snow no longer bit. It melted. The fields that once shivered beneath storms now shimmered with soft green, puddles glittering like glass under the morning sun. The cabin that had been a refuge through the winter had changed too, its windows thrown open, curtains fluttering in a warm breeze. Inside, laughter, real laughter, echoed for the first time in a long while. Jack Rowan stood on the porch, one hand shielding his eyes from the sunlight. His flannel shirt sleeves were rolled up, his once weather-beaten face softer now, framed by the faint shadow of stubble. The scar on his temple had lightened. Beside him, a framed certificate leaned against the porch post, still waiting to be hung. Rex, Civilian Valor Award, for saving life under duty beyond command. Rex lay in the grass below, 9 years old but dignified, his black and tan coat brushed and gleaming. The fur along his shoulder had regrown over the scar, though his gait was slower now. He watched the yard with half-lidded eyes, tail sweeping lazily in the grass whenever Emily called his name. She was running barefoot across the soft earth, light brown hair catching the sunlight, her laughter bright as wind chimes. "Don't go too far," Jack called. His voice carried authority softened by affection. Emily turned, hands on her hips in mock defiance. "I'm not a baby," she shouted back. Rex huffed as if agreeing with her. Jack smiled, that rare, quiet smile that had taken months to return. Sarah stepped out from the side path, her auburn hair tied loosely, wearing a simple blue shirt tucked into worn jeans. She carried a basket of garden tools and smelled faintly of soap and pine. Life had returned to her face, too. Her once guarded eyes now carried a calm warmth. Years of tending to broken things, people, animals, hearts, had taught her resilience disguised as gentleness. She set the basket down and looked over at Jack. "You finally hung that award yet?" He shook his head. "Rex doesn't care about medals." "Maybe not," she said, smiling, "but some heroes deserve to be remembered where the light hits them." They both glanced toward Rex, who now had his head resting on Emily's lap as she tried to braid flowers into his collar. The dog's patience was saintly. Later that morning, Luke drove up the dirt path, his old sheriff's SUV dusted with pollen instead of snow. He was in plain clothes, jeans and a tan jacket, his dark blonde hair messy from the drive. Luke was the kind of man who carried steadiness like a second badge. He waved as he got out, greeting Sarah with an easy grin before kneeling to pat Rex. "Well, partner," he said, "looks like you're still the toughest guy in town." Rex wagged once, satisfied. Emily ran over with her sketchpad clutched to her chest. "I drew something," she announced. She handed Luke a page. Rex sitting under a tree, surrounded by children holding books and puppies. Over it, in big block letters, Rex's Haven. Luke chuckled. "So, it's official then? You're naming it after him?" Jack nodded, stepping beside Sarah. Behind them, the newly painted sign on the cabin's old shed confirmed it. Rex's Haven. For children and rescued dogs. Sarah's idea had grown from something small and tender, a shelter for both kinds of strays. Jack rebuilt the shed, added fences, and repaired the roof. Sarah handled the paperwork and medical checks. Emily insisted on decorating every wall with her drawings, hearts, paw prints, and snowflakes melting into flowers. Within weeks, the place became a safe corner of town for children who had been left behind, and for dogs who once had no one left to trust. Luke came by every weekend, helping train Rex for therapy work. He taught him to sit beside children during reading time, to rest his chin on trembling knees, to listen in a way that only a loyal soul could. Emily often joined the sessions, handing out treats and reminding Rex to be gentle. He always was. One Saturday afternoon, a small boy named Oliver came to the Haven. 7 years old, quiet, thin as a reed, eyes downcast. His mother was gone, his father in rehab. He wouldn't speak to anyone for days, until Rex limped over and simply lay beside him, pressing his nose against the boy's hand. Within minutes, Oliver whispered, "He's warm." Sarah watched from the porch, tears glinting in her eyes. "That's what healing looks like," she said softly. That evening, while the others worked in the yard, Sarah and Jack sat by the porch railing, watching Emily play with Rex near the fence. The sunset painted the ridge gold. Sarah leaned back, her voice thoughtful. "You know," she said, "people always think healing is about fixing something broken, but it's not. No one really fixes anyone else." Jack turned toward her, brow furrowed. "Then what do we do?" "We stand back up together," she said. "That's enough." The words hung in the air, gentle and true. Jack didn't answer, but his gaze drifted to Emily and Rex. The girl was tossing a ball now, Rex chasing it with a clumsy enthusiasm that made her laugh until she fell into the grass. Sarah smiled. "Looks like you're doing just fine at standing together." Days stretched into weeks, and Coldwater Ridge bloomed. The snow along the fence finally melted completely, leaving behind patches of bright green. The town began to visit more often. Teachers, parents, even the sheriff, bringing supplies, food, and old blankets. "For the Haven," they'd say. It was as if kindness itself had thawed with the season. One afternoon, Emily sat at the long wooden table painting a sign that said, "Love lives here." Jack passed by, drying his hands from fixing a gutter, and paused to watch. Her strokes were careful but firm, the same determination that had once carried her through the storm. "Looks good," he said. "You think Rex can read it?" Emily grinned. "He already knows." That night, when the sun dipped behind the ridge, the three of them stood together in the yard. Sarah leaned against the porch post, arms crossed loosely. Jack's hand rested on Rex's back. Emily knelt in the grass, whispering something only the dog could hear. The wind came down from the mountains, no longer biting, just cool enough to stir the pine branches. Jack lifted his gaze toward the ridge where the storm had once nearly ended them all. Now, the same place glowed under streaks of golden light. For a moment, he thought of Melissa, Emily's mother, and how sometimes miracles come in broken pieces that only fit together when you stop fighting them. He exhaled slowly. "We made it," he whispered. Sarah smiled faintly beside him. You didn't just survive, Jack, she said. You built something new out of the wreckage. That's what grace looks like. Rex gave a quiet, contented sigh and closed his eyes, the last rays of sunset warming his fur. Emily rested her hand on his paw, tracing the faint scar on his leg. He's still my hero, she said softly. Jack glanced at her, then at Sarah, then back at the dog. Ours too, he said. The wind carried their laughter across the yard, a soft, human sound mingling with the rustle of spring leaves. The sky turned pink and gold, light spilling through the trees like a promise. Because in the end, Coldwater Ridge wasn't about storms or loss. It was about what remains when the snow melts, the kind of love that listens, the kind that stays. Maybe God doesn't send angels with wings, Jack thought as he looked at Rex, at Emily, at Sarah. Maybe sometimes he sends them with fur and scars and the courage to keep showing up. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in quiet miracles. Comment below with the name of the person or animal that changed your life. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of hope, faith, and second chances. Du